There are four things that are assured to us in life: death, taxes, fights at Waffle Houses, and AniTubers. All of these things are going to be around forever, unfortunately.
In a time before there was smartphones, in a time before there was BDs, DVDs, even the internet as we know it, Neon Genesis Evangelion came out in 1995.
Well, seeing as I know that you're an AniTuber and you don't do any research, let me go ahead and do it for you, because it's literally just a Google search away. What actually qualifies as a smartphone was actually created by IBM in 1992 and then released for purchase in 1994. It was called the Simon Personal Communicator. While archaic by today's standards, it still had a lot of the features that we use today, such as like a calendar address book, and you were able to have a touchscreen on it as well, and being able to send and receive both emails and faxes. While you are right about 1995 being the year that we didn't have DVDs, I would like to point your attention to the world's first DVD player that was introduced in November of 1996 by Toshiba. Now, depending on how technical you want to get when it comes to the internet, it was very much a thing back in 1995. We had America Online here in America, where you could just kind of go on the internet, and it featured chat rooms and things of that nature. You were able to just go and buy things straight from any place, because the internet was around back in like the late 80s. But again, research.
It has been 24, almost 25 years since it came out. In under a week, Netflix will be releasing the series to the public.
I think the word that you're looking for is re-release, because Neon Genesis Evangelion came out a long time ago. God, I'm just showing my age here. But yeah, it came out years before this. Many years ago. I actually owned some of the DVDs when it was from ADV Films, and then Funimation decided to get a hold of it, and that's how we have the movies. But when it came to the TV version of everything, well, Netflix is the one that bought it up. And let me go ahead and remind you that this video was made in 2019, so take everything that he says as this aged poorly.
Which in turn will allow many that were never really given the chance to be able to watch it.
Or you can just do what myself and other astute people do. I mean, we are sailing the very high seas, if you catch my drift.
Honestly, it's amazing to see Neon Genesis finally return, finally getting licensed by a company. It's kind of jarring, actually, that it took this long for Neon Genesis to actually get licensed, but thankfully a company like Netflix was able to pick it up.
For the sake of your sanity and my own, I'm not going to include the entire segment about the licensing thing because it gets really messy, but if you want to know more about it, it'll be an exclusive video over on Patreon and if you're a YouTube member. So if you're interested, feel free to sign up for those. Another shill segment, I know, but there's just a lot to go through, and I just want to laugh at this dude for a good couple of minutes.
And I'm just glad that many will be able to experience it for the first time. It's honestly something that it took me a very long time to get around to watching myself, and then eventually kind of glancing and reading the manga, and it was a few years back when I really started it. So it's great to see that the series will finally return to the States. And also, it's just crazy that something that had so much of an impact on anime and just Japanese pop culture took this long.
Now, if you're wondering, this is the crux of the video where we're going to start to inquire, well, what are those changes? What changed anime and manga forever? Why was Neon Genesis Evangelion so influential? And you're going to get a whole lot of non-answers, so let me go ahead and just preface you that way.
But it's better late than never. So before I get any further, I just briefly want to say I want to thank Viz Media for allowing me to do a video on this topic.
Wait, they had to send you an art book so that way you could talk about this? Why can't you just talk about Neon Genesis Evangelion? Why can't you just, boot it up and then talk about it?
But anyways, let's get right into it, okay? Neon Genesis Evangelion. It came out in 1995. That is a long time ago. It is the year I was born. Basically, Neon Genesis is as old as I am. I am currently 24 years old. So it's crazy to think that literally the year I was born, it came out.
Guys, isn't it crazy that a thing that you like came out the same year that you were born? I know, it is so crazy and random lol XD.
But let's get right into it. Before Neon Genesis, anime had a very different form. It was not the anime that we know today.
You mean produced in 2D style and then broadcast on television and sometimes just put direct to video? I don't know what you mean. What do you mean by this statement?
When it comes to what we're used to watching year after year, season after season, anime was very different. It was in a time, like I said, before DVDs, BDs, and in a time before really anime originals were ever a thing.
Well, it seems like we still don't know anything that we're talking about, so let me go ahead and stop you there. Just because they weren't on DVDs or Blu-rays doesn't mean that they weren't out on home video. They were just out on VHS as opposed to, your little disc-based formats. And as far as anime originals, there were no anime originals before Neon Genesis?
And at the time, before 1995, there obviously was a few hit series here and there. I mean, you had, like, the Studio Ghibli and how they were making movies. I mean, you did have the Gundam series, but overall, when it came to anime, it was very different. Anime, for the most part, it was mainly geared for younger audiences, like children's shows.
That's factually incorrect. Even if I were to use Dirty Pair that came out in 1985 as the starting point, there were still shows after it like Lupin the Third, Fist of the North Star, and Dan Cougar. If you know what any of those are, they were anime TV series that weren't necessarily for children. They were meant for maybe PG-13 audiences. But even then, you're still not winning anything by saying that there were none of these that existed before because anime was geared towards children. That's actually just stupid.
It didn't really want to focus heavily on TV, anime, and have, like, anime original stories, or very complex stories that were, for niche groups, or just individuals that were for an adult audience.
Looks like someone forgot about Gundam Victory.
It was just not very common at the time. Now, you can argue that Gundam did have a very serious start when it came out from Studio Sunrise, but after the first few series of Gundam, it eventually started turning into more of a series for the kids, for just a wide audience.
Looks like someone forgot Mobile Suit Gundam 8th MS Team.
For, children could sit down and watch it and enjoy it, which is not a bad thing, but, anime was just a very different form. And when Neon Genesis Evangelion came out, it sent waves around the entirety of Japanese culture.
By being a series?
In a lot of ways, many throughout the anime community, manga community, and even in Japanese culture, I would assume, they like to refer to Neon Genesis as the Star Wars of their culture.
Out of all of the things that you could have said in this video that would have been less offensive, you said the most offensive thing by saying that Eva is the same as Star Wars. That's actually just... I don't even know what this video is at this point. If anything, Gundam is the Star Wars of Japanese culture, because Gundam is just way more popular. I'm sorry, but Eva is nowhere near on the same level or the same tier as Gundam will ever be.
And I highly doubt I'm the first person to ever say this.
No, I would like to hope that you're the only person that said this.
I know there's probably many that love the series, are probably very aware of just how much it is beloved and how it really is intertwined with Japanese pop culture.
You still haven't given any examples of why it's influential in any regard. So if you're going to say things like this, at least have some examples. You could have said, well, maybe coffee prices spiked up because they had the collaboration with them. But instead you're just throwing out conjecture.
And that's just crazy to think about, because, I mean, when you're in the West, we all know about Star Wars. We know how popular Star Wars is.
Was. I think you meant to say how popular Star Wars was.
But that is what Eva is for those in Japan.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not. I can almost promise you that it is really not.
It is that popular. Everyone has heard about it. Even if they never watched it, they have heard about it. It's very similar to how Star Wars is in our culture.
I would like to probably bet $1 to a donut that most people have seen at least one Star Wars film. And I know that's a good stretch, and I might be paying out some people, but I would say that at least every person, if they haven't seen one film, they've at least seen a clip of that film. That's being influential. If you showed someone Ava stuff, they might have to question you a little bit because they don't know it.
But let's get right into it. What made Neon Genesis so different? Why was it something that really stood out and, like I said, changed anime for keeps to this very day?
It only took him this long to get to the point, so I guess we have to hear what he says, and hopefully you guys don't want to scratch your brain out.
Well, like I said, before Neon Genesis, there really wasn't anime originals. Most shows were either based off of manga turned into anime, or it was movie adaptations. That's what it was. You never really had TV series wanting to venture out and do something very unique, because at the time, nobody knew if it was really worth the effort or really going to make money. It's kind of like a company doesn't want to go out of their way and do something if it's at risk of losing profits.
Well, that's just simply not true. If you look at the list of every Macross series, every Mobile Suit Gundam series, even Gold Ran, or even Sorhai Isami, or even Edo Ranger, you can look at those as examples of original anime, and those all came out either just before or during 1995. So either you're just making this up to make it sound better than it actually is, or you just actually don't know what you're talking about.
And it makes sense, but that was the thing. Before we got the anime as we know today, there wasn't something like Neon Genesis or what we have today. And so they didn't want to take those risks. They didn't want to take those risks of things that were just so bizarre and out there with their own individual writing that, they just didn't want to do it. They didn't want to take a risk like that.
Go into your little Google search bar, and I want you to type in Violence Jack. Go ahead, don't worry, I'll wait. I'll sit here, I'll just mess around with my phone. I want you to Google it, okay? And then I want you to go to YouTube. And once you pull up those results, I'm pretty sure you'll see my point. Don't worry, I'll sit here and wait. Just trust me. And just gotta retweet some things here really quick. Hang on. Oh, okay, it seems like you guys found it. Now, if you're looking at the exact same thing that I am, I don't think that I need to elaborate any further on this point.
And finally, Studio Gainax, a studio that's very beloved and many recognize its name just from the uttering it. It has made countless popular series throughout history. Studio Gainax is known for Neon Genesis Evangelion as well. And it was an anime original, obviously. Now, there is a manga of Neon Genesis, but at the time, Neon Genesis manga was actually more along the lines to promote the anime. The anime, technically, is the start of it all, so it is still an anime original. It's very reminiscent of what happened very recently in the past year with Darling in the Franxx.
The Darling in the Franxx fandom is dying. Make sure you watch this video to make it die faster.
If you remember Darling in the Franxx, you know that there was a manga being made alongside of the anime. It's reminiscent to that. And on top of that, Darling in the Franxx, regardless of how you feel about the series, it did take a lot of inspiration from Ava as well.
It did, except for everything else that was good about it. It took all of the negative influences and threw it into a show.
The thing is Neon Genesis being an anime original, it stood out automatically.
In what way? Because the characters look a little different? Or is it because of all the Christian imagery and symbolism? Because, I mean, other shows have done that too. It's just this was the one that, I guess, hit it off just right?
And it tackled themes that was just not really seen in anime at the time. It tackled themes of characters that were broken, imperfect.
Now, I can't list off almost every single character that this applies to, but it definitely applies to before 1995. I can't sit here and tell you every single character. But I will tell you that if you have watched anime and you're over the age of 20, like this gentleman is, then you should probably know that there's a lot of broken characters. That's what we call character development.
Characters that were not the stereotypical hero that will accomplish anything without any problem. They show no weakness, nothing wrong with them, no faults.
So, yeah, I think I'm just gonna call bullshit.
And that's one of the things that people really love Neon Genesis for, is that it had flawed characters. It had characters that showed these cracks within them. Something that, like I said, you did not see previously.
Literally any story before Neon Genesis existed has always had flawed characters. Are you actually this mental, or are you just, like, I don't know, forgetful? This is like feigned ignorance for no reason.
And it made way for more of an adult audience, and it really established otaku culture as it is today.
That's not all that true. If anything, the biggest juggernaut of anime series, which was Dragon Ball Z, came out in 1989, and then it finally came to North America sometime afterwards. Neon Genesis wasn't even close to that in comparison. It just wasn't. Dragon Ball Z is one of the largest franchises in the entire world. Neon Genesis doesn't even come close to that. The closest second is probably still One Piece.
And in turn, it also kind of made it to where merchandise was very important. Because even if Bandai, that also owned Sunrise, that created Gundam, they only made limited amount of merchandise. Merchandising wasn't really a big thing like it is today. Like, when you think about Japan, you think about anime merchandising. You think about all the wacky stuff, to the clothing, to the body pillows, to the manga and anime. You know, there's just a lot of things, figures and all that. And, you know, stuff like that wasn't the norm before Neon Genesis.
It's almost like when technology reaches a certain point, you can start to produce a lot of those things. Because even in the case of Gundam figures, they didn't actually come out all that great until afterwards. Besides, having merch doesn't mean that your show is profitable or successful, it just means you have money to throw around.
Neon Genesis was able to create a lot of merchandise, like stuff like this now. You know, like I said, the art book that Viz just released, if it wasn't for Neon Genesis, like, there wasn't much stuff like this. There wasn't really merchandise to the extent that there is today.
It's almost like you don't know what you're talking about, because anime art books have been around for ages. In fact, Akira Toriyama made the World illustration book, and that released in September of 1990. So that predates that by 5 years.
And it's amazing to see something like that, of how it really changed the marketing approach for anime.
But how did it do that? You've only said it was a show that came out that wasn't like the others, which you've already established it is actually just like the other ones, but apparently this makes it different somehow?
But let's go one step further, okay? It wasn't just the fact that Neon Genesis was an anime original, it was because it really allowed people to look at anime very differently. Once again, I want to go back to the point I said earlier on in this video. Anime was mainly geared for younger children.
Oh boy, we've looped around. This is worse than listening to a DSP pre-stream.
There was some serious movies and stuff that came out, and Studio Ghibli was around and all that, but overall, it wasn't really meant for adult audiences.
Friend, I cannot help you try to find anything that is not marketed towards a kid in the year 1995 and prior, because there's a dozen. There's literally numerous amounts. Where do you think Devilman comes from?
And Neon Genesis was geared for an adult audience. It was definitely something maybe younger kids and teens can enjoy and love, but it was really something that brought many to start thinking about. It brought a lot of philosophical discussion upon it because of just the anime and what it did.
But what did it do? It showed some people dying? Great, we've seen that in other shows before that. But again, my point is, what did it do differently than those other series? Because it sounds like nothing. And if you have a hard time recollecting anything that you saw before this, then I would say that this is just some weird tunnel vision.
And because of that, it really changed how people write shows since then.
Listen, I know you're paid to shill this or whatever, but you don't have to suck off the show this hard.
Like, you can look at series after that was obviously inspired by Neon Genesis, like Revolutionary Girl Utena.
Not gonna read into this too much, but when you look at the inspirations list for something like Revolutionary Girl Utena, you can see that it's based more off of something different. And nowhere is it ever mentioned that Neon Genesis Evangelion is the cause of this. And I'm just gonna go ahead and link it so that way you guys can comb through it, but trust me, it doesn't say it on there.
Or you can look at Razafon. You know, Razafon is a series that's just crazy and just straight up always, kind of intertwined with Neon Genesis. People recommend, that series if you love Neon Genesis or vice versa because of how identical it is. And Retconning came after Neon Genesis.
If you do look at any of those recommendations, like the one that's on my anime list, people will tell you that this is a little bit different since it tends to be a little bit easier and not so intelligent, concentrating on a love story with harem-like influences, but they can still see the connection between the two.
Revolutionary Girl Utena also came after, and many like to reference the Utena as like End of Utena when it came to the movie because of just how closely entwined or how it took inspiration from Eva.
Already debunked, and also, why do you keep using the word intertwined?
And the same can be said for Steven Universe that came out very recent in our times.
I'm going to sound a little facetious here, but I'm going to label this under the I'm inspired by anime, but I don't know any other anime, so I'll just choose this one, or I'll choose Akira. I mean, this is essentially what happens whenever you see the bike slide thing.
You have it to where just many series have been inspired thanks to Neon Genesis. It is constantly referenced, and it's amazing to see something like that. And it also, in a way, you can kind of stretch on the fact because of just how different Neon Genesis was, it made way for something like Monogatari to be made and eventually turned into an anime.
You're right, this is a little bit of a stretch. I think you need to not do that so much.
Just the wacky stuff like Madoka Magica, if it wasn't for something really taking this step and doing something very crazy, something that you just don't normally see, then we most likely never would have gotten some of the stuff we got to this day. I mean, I think eventually it would have happened. I do think eventually anime would have gotten to the point it's at today.
That's because there's always going to be a creator that wants to share their story, and that's why we have some of the influences that we have. I'm not saying that Neon Genesis Evangelion isn't influential, it's just that it didn't make the things that we have today as known as it is. We don't have things because of them. We have things because it just would have happened. It's the natural progression of technology and also the natural progression of media as a whole. But that's just me being philosophical and being a toxic shithead.
But it probably would have taken a lot longer. I just think Neon Genesis was at the right time, perfect place at the right time for it to really just make Japanese pop culture explode and change for all time.
But you haven't told us what it does. All you said is it's changed the world the way that we know it now. It's done so much for everything. And then when you raise your hand and you ask, well, Chibi, what do you mean? Well, then you're left with nothing but buzzwords. And yes, things can be inspired by it later on. Like there's things that are inspired by Dirty Pair, but people kind of don't like it all that much, or people like Dragon Ball Z a little bit more. And that's why you get a lot of those gags in a lot of anime and cartoons, oddly enough, here. So again, tell me, list me like 3 things.
Because when you think about it, Neon Genesis came out at a time when the internet was really starting to get going. The internet came out in like the 80s, and like late 80s, and then 90s it really started to get bigger. And at the time, because of that, it made it to where many were able to spread information on a said series, and I think that's one of the reasons why Neon Genesis was able to gain as much traction as it did, was because of a variety of factors. It's not just because it was anime original, or something that was just never seen before its time, but also because the internet was really able to allow it to expand across many different regions, allow many to really see what it was for the first time.
I'm going to kind of halfway show my age a little bit more here, but back in those days, people were generally just going to one of their local video stores because they happened to have a box wash up on the shores, and it would be full of this thing from Japan that no one really knew what it was about. And so people would kind of look through it and dissect it, and then they would try to duplicate copies of the VHSs that they had, leading to a lot of bootlegs. And that's what also led into people dubbing over some of the Japanese shows themselves, but that's for another day. But again, the internet did help with that, no doubt, but I don't think that you're really knowing when that actually happened. Also, didn't you say that the internet was much different? So if it was much different, how did they share information about a show that came out in '95 if it wasn't what it is today?
And like I said, this is something that, I think changed anime for good because it reached Western audiences where people really wanted to see more of whatever this anime was and wanted more like it. And that is the reason why you see a lot of shows that try to replicate what Neon Genesis did.
First of all, Chibi, this isn't them trying to replicate this. This is just a reference. It's nothing more than a simple nod. Also, other shows have to replicate Neon Genesis because it might have giant robots and it might have people having depression. Oh man, there must be so many shows just like it.
Because of just how popular it was. So yeah, I think if it wasn't for Neon Genesis, anime would be a very different shape. And even if you don't like the series and you don't care much for it, I think at the very least you have to show respect for Neon Genesis because it changed what we love today.
It changed what exactly? You keep saying it changed everything, but what did it do? What are the effects that we see now because of what it did? What other shows that I've already listed before, what did those not do that this one did? Is it the biblical stuff? Because, I mean, other shows were doing that before this, too. But, again, we have to look inside of our little hug box and make sure that we're not getting too out of line with what the community says.
It changed every show that we love. Many of our shows probably wouldn't be here if it was for that. It really energized the market.
I'm pretty sure my regular slice of life shows would be just fine without it existing. But since we live in the weirdest and darkest timeline, we can't really say for sure now, can we?
So, I'm happy I got to look into this topic. I really am happy that Viz Media allowed me to kind of look into the history of just Neon Genesis and how it changed things. And
am I having an aneurysm? You didn't look into any history. You just said it was this thing that came out in 95, and the rest is history.
Also, the more I look at, let's say, this art book, because I did have a glance at it inside, I just want to show a few pictures for you guys. When you look at the artwork of Neon Genesis, it really stands out. The designs, these are designs, from the anime, or just the series in general. When you look at the designs, it's so unique. Yes, you could say Gundam was before this, but when it came to mechs, these mechs are very unique looking. The colors, to just the way the anime to this day honestly still holds up. It does have a dated look to it, in terms of art, but it still has a charm to it that just really stands out.
Like what? The colors? How, I don't know, big they are? How detailed they are? Give me, please, any descriptors.
An endless amount of charm. And I really appreciate just the work and thought that was put into such a just fantastic anime. Just a series in general. And I cannot recommend this series enough for all of those that, just want something that's very different. And to see the history of what created anime today.
One could go out on a limb and say that Berserk was way more influential than Eva was. It's just a known fact. That's why everything has references to it. Neon Genesis, probably not so much.
But, overall, I think I'm going to wrap up the video here. I really, really love this series. I'm just so glad I'm going to be able to watch it on Netflix very soon, in less than a week. And apparently it's going to be having a new dub. So that is good news for some and bad news for others because I know many love the original dub. But at the same time, it is good to have a new dub as well to get to experience it for a second time and just see how it really is.
And then you stumbled upon why it's not so good. Trust me, I think we all see the ramifications of this action.
So once again, I just want to say thank you very much, Viz Media, for sponsoring this video. Thank you guys for allowing me to get this far, for I could do something like this, because it was a hell of a lot of fun being able to talk about this topic, and I would love to do more stuff like this. Maybe make videos on the history of anime, talking about, the first anime, Astro Boy.
Okay, this is where I have to stop the video. Astro Boy is not the first anime. If you think that, then you really need to go back and start looking at some history, because the first anime was actually made in 1917 in Japan. But what do I know? I just spent all day researching this so I could respond to your stupid video. But then again, this will probably be put up somewhere, and then someone's going to be like, well, NECRO, you missed a couple of things here. And in all honesty, I just don't care. I hate talking about AniTubers, and I hate that they're so stupid. Even back in 2019, when this was supposed to be a video, I still feel like I just don't have any type of stake in this. Instead, I would probably rather just yell at the Nintoddlers because they hate the Steam Deck so much.